Dedicated to all those brave Englishmen who have fought and died to defend English values. The right to a fair trial, judged by 12 good men and true. Freedom of speech. You have no right not to be offended among the English. The right to only obey laws that people you have had a say in appointing make. Equality under the law. One law, the same law for all. The right to live your life as you please, as long as you're not harming those around you. And the right to defend yourself and your family. The foundations of these values were set in the time of the Anglo-Saxons. Let's not forget our cousins in America and across the English-speaking world. They inherited those values and some of their genes from the same Anglo-Saxon source as the English did. And when we called for help, they came and fought by our side. Gwyn Williams, the great Welsh historian, stated that history isn't a story, it's an inquiry. He went on to say that we ask the past questions, and those questions differ depending on who we are. Well, I'm an Englishman and proud of it, as proud as I am of my maternal Welsh ancestry. This is a tale of great English warriors, men who defended their people from the Vikinger. I refer to real Vikingers, slaving, raiding bastards, not the invented artisans and traders that the British Broadcasting Corporation often portrays them as. To go Viking is to go raiding. That's what the word means. It's a verb, not a noun. It refers to an activity undertaken by men who wish to subjugate and exploit the English people. If I've not been completely historically accurate, then I apologise. I hope I have, however, captured the spirit of the Anglo-Saxons, the English, the people I knew, the folk that I have worked, fished, drunk, fought with, and sometimes against. My friends, my family, my people. The characters in this book are based on the white working class descendants of the Anglo-Saxons. I knew them well as a child in the Black Country. They have the attitudes I saw those men display and use the language they used. Many of the men I knew had fought in the Second World War. They were part of a different culture, from a time before political correctness. At the end of my tale, I've written a short account of how real historical events and my own experiences have influenced the writing in Saxon Wrath. My name is Aruntin. I am a deathbringer. I am a shatterer of shields, a cleaver of limbs, and a slicer of throats. I am not the Aruntin you may have heard of, but I am named in honour of his glorious deeds, for our deeds can live on, passing down the generations long after we have melted away. Make no mistake, though, I'm just as sharp and deadly as my namesake ever was. Enough of me, let's talk about you. Oh, you poor Englishman, you sit without the dancing glow of flames or the comfort of the mead cup. When did you last eat the flesh of the wild boar, freshly roasted on a spit and dripping with flavour? When did you last hear the great songs vibrate through a great hall, your kin gathered around you? Songs of your people, the men of your blood, songs of the great deeds they performed against the Vikinger. Your teeth are too white, your hands too smooth. Could you even lift a blade in anger? If you raised a sword, would you know how to wield it? Don't worry, you're not the first of your people to have lost their way. People who had to search within themselves to find who they really were, who they were born to be. Look with me into the bronze bowl, and focus your will upon the water. With effort and time you may see their weather-worn faces. Then look into their eyes and see the soul of your race. As the goddess Frigg is my judge, as she will judge us all in time, I promise to tell you their tale. A Saxon village. The mud-covered village of my people lay on the edge of the great Mercian forest. Small rectangular houses built of wood, with walls of cow shit and dirt, lined the road. The hall was jokingly called Great, but it served its purpose. In the months before my arrival, a great turmoil had fallen upon the land. In the hall the people gathered, huddled around the blackened mead cauldron, staring into the water and let images appear. Concentrate and listen. You can do that, can't you? Yes, yes, you hear their voices. Their language is a little strange, earthy, not as flowery or pretentious as yours, but you'll get used to it. It'll make no difference. We will pay our tribute and they will leave us alone. Things will be as they have always been. The headman page spoke confidently, though few of the people were reassured. What difference does it make if the Mercian Angles or Vikinger collect the silver from us each year? We paid our tribute to the Mercian king for our protection. He's run off, and I'm not sure I shouldn't too. A villager opened his thoughts to his fellows. Where do we run to? The Welsh and their mountains? To the Saxons of Wessex, perhaps. Their kingdoms will fall too. The Vikinger cannot be beaten. Fru disagreed with that assessment. Wessex has called to us. We must send our weapon men to them. They are Saxons. They are our kind, and we will fight back. Aldhelm had been trying to speak for some time, and his agitation showed in his voice. They will die, and Wessex will burn. No one can stand against the Vikinger. Haven't you got that into your fucking thick head yet? Page looked threateningly at Aldhelm. I'm going to Wessex, for I'll die with a sword in my hand before kissing the Vikinger's arse here, Aldhelm announced as he met Page's stare. Who will come with me? An embarrassed silence filled the hall. Eask bowed his head and avoided eye contact with his kinsman. Aldhelm. He didn't want to go and fight anyone. Ask was to be handfasted in a couple of months and wanted to enjoy his woman and tend to his fields. It was all right for Aldhelm to speak brave words. He had no one, no land, nothing to lose. Aldhelm scoffed and stormed off. You aren't fit to be called Saxons. Fuck off, you're no better than the rest of us. The village won't miss you. Ever the Troublemaker. Page gave his opinion of the youth, and a few more villagers shouted insults at Aldhelm too. Aldhelm replied by making a sign with his hand that showed that the contempt between him and the headman was mutual. Much talk was exchanged, but the people decided they would stay put and hope for the best. Things couldn't be that bad, could they? Ask walked away from the gathering, as did all the villagers. In silence they sought the sanctuary of their beds. The bang of a hammer onto metal and the blast of light from a furnace illuminated Ask's cottage and the lower half of the village. Ask walked towards the smithy. Bron was still working. You weren't at the council? Ask questioned the back of a broad, dark-haired man. Bron answered without turning his head. Oh, you mighty Saxons wouldn't have wanted a Welshman there, surely. After all, I'm only worth half the wergild of a man such as yourself. I've never treated you as anything less than a fellow, Ask responded, a little hurt by his friend's attitude. Not since I beat 7 shades of shit out of you, you haven't. So Bron was in one of his moods, Ask thought. We were children, and I still saved your life after that. That you did. Bron put his hammer down. There, finished. Then he turned to his friend. What are the Saxons going to do then? We're going to stay. Aldhelm is going to join the men of Wessex, the rest of us while we stay. Everything we have is here. Ask spoke quietly and slowly. Aldhelm always did like a scrap. I hope they have enough beer for him in Wessex to meet his needs. Bron pushed another of his hammers into a large sack. You going then, Bron? I am. I will do what my ancestors did when you Saxons came. I'm taken to the forest, where I can wait and see what happens. Bron pushed a newly forged glowing hot hinge with a piece of metal along the anvil. Page will find his hinge here, as promised, but I'll be long gone. I was going to come for you and I packed. I'm staying here. You'll miss my hand fastening. Ask found his friend's proposition tempting, but Beowyn's fires were even more inviting. Well, you know my opinion on that. You'd been better missing your hand fastening too. Bron couldn't help to be direct. To be honest, he never could, and was too old to change now. Ask had heard Bron's opinion of his future wife, and her family. He wasn't going to have that conversation again. There's my sister too, but I will stay. Well, if you change your mind and run to the woods, head for the cleavage between the two hills north of here, then follow the stream to its birthplace. Bron shook his friend's hand and then gripped his shoulder and shook his whole body. Good luck, Bron stated as he released Ask, using a quieter tone than he usually adopted. God go with you, Bron. Ask watched his friend leave and then noticed Berwin walking towards his dwelling and left to join her. Two people who shared the empty, cold feeling of not knowing what was going to happen next, hoping for the best while fearing the worst, moved to share the comfort of the same bed. As they entered the cottage, Ask's sister turned in her furs. Oh, Beowyn. Well, we'll be moaning half the night, she thought. Well, not much sleep for me. Then the young girl contemplated that Beowyn had the comfort of a man's arms, while she, Leoflida, had only her furs and the fading fire and her fears. Beowyn lay upon Ask's chest. Neither Ask nor she wanted to couple that night, so Leofrida could sleep in peace if she wished. Although a restful night's sleep was unlikely for anyone in the village. Beowyn just wanted to hold her man. In the warmth of his bed, she could pretend that nothing had changed, that the chatter about the Vikinger was just silly rumours. It'll be all right, won't it? Beowyn spoke like a child, and Ask held her tightly. Yes, it will. Ask looked towards the thatch of his cottage, with no emotion showing on his face at all. The next morning they arrived. They looked like East Angles. Wearing baggy trousers and furs, East Angles wore less ostentatious clothes, but they still looked like East Angles. They weren't the giants that the people had spoken of, but intimidating nonetheless. The talker walked ahead, a broad smile upon his face. Behind him, half a dozen warriors followed. The villagers watched hesitantly, many mothers clinging to their children. Page met them and handed over the silver. The Vikinger looked quite pleased, smirking at each other a lot. As they walked past the crowd, heading to the main hall, Ask noticed that their eyes were moving everywhere, examining everything, but taking an especially keen interest in the people. Ask watched as the Vikinger allowed his gaze to stop, taking in the millier's wife from head to toe. She smiled back at him too. She always was a slut, Ask thought. He himself had had her less than a week before she had been handfasted to the miller. The village priest, Page, and the Vikinger, the great and the good, disappeared into the hall, and life returned to normal in the village. In farming communities there's always work to be done. Even so, most people look towards the great hall frequently, some allowing their imagination to stray into the building and conjuring up the conversations taking place within. No mind was concentrated more than Ask. His woman would be meeting the Vikinger at that very moment and serving them beer and food, a thought that made Ask increasingly uneasy. Eventually the waiting was over. The Vikinger emerged, and the villagers' eyes focused upon them. Page made a point of shaking hands with the talker in the village square. Then Page, the headman, a smile set in stone across his face, held the foreigner's hand for longer than was normal. The Vikingers strolled away, still surveying their new domain. There were other villages to visit that day. Eask was keen to search out Beorwyn, and found her cleaning plates and washing tankards. "What are they like?" Eask inquired. "Like any other men I've met," Beorwyn replied, without taking her gaze away from the dishes. "And what does that mean?" Eask's curiosity didn't even begin to be satisfied. "Like I said," Beorwyn started to wipe a plate. "Like any other men." A brief conversation ensued, with Beorwyn giving a yacht of yes and no answers. She certainly wasn't her normal talkative sense. Eask soon tired of questioning her. "I will see you later." But his comment was greeted with silence and a nod of the head.